Hello, I'm Mark Broom. Welcome to our live coverage of a high-level event at UN headquarters in New York on Korea's Saemaul Undong movement, or New Community Movement, and how it can be applied to help rural communities in parts of Africa, Southeast Asia and Latin America. Now, a number of developing countries are keen to learn more about how they can adopt this movement that transformed Korea from the impoverished country it was in the 1950s and 60s to the Korea we know today, which is one of the top 15 economies in the world. This event started about 2 hours ago, but we're going to dip in and out of the live feed from the final hour or so of the proceedings on what is an important session for Korea, one that shows how far the country's influence has grown on the world stage. So we'll start to take a look in just a moment at the live feed from the UN headquarters there in New York. This is going to be the high-level session, the presidential session. For the last hour and a half or so, we've had the professional session. They've just taken a break for the past 30 minutes or so. They're gathering, about to take their seats, and we'll start hearing from them soon. This will be moderated by Helen Clark, UN Development Programme Administrator. Now, her name is likely one you've heard before, as she was Prime Minister of New Zealand for 9 years, from 1999 to 2008, so this is a new role for her. President Park Geun-hye, who you saw just a moment ago, will be making the opening statement very shortly, and the President will also make concluding remarks towards the end of the 1 hour session. There are plenty of high-profile attendees at this high-level event as well. They include UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon, who, as a Korean, growing up at the time of the Saemaul Undong movement, would have seen firsthand
ladies and gentlemen,
its effects. We're hearing Helen Clark's voice now, telling everyone to take a seat to get ready. Secretary Ban will also make some welcoming remarks. We're also going to hear from the leaders of countries like Rwanda, Laos, Vietnam and Peru. These are partner nations of the Saemaul Undong. They are keen to learn about this movement that transformed Korea in the late 20th century to the very strong economy it is now.
We have our very own Secretary General of the United Nations. We have the President of the Republic of Rwanda. We have the President of the Lao People's Democratic Republic. We have the President of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. And we have the President of the Republic of Peru. We have OECD Secretary General Angel Gurria, and we have with us the World Bank Group President's Special Envoy for the post-2015 agenda. This is truly a spectacular panel, and we thank all who have come for their commitment to promoting innovative community development solutions for achieving the Sustainable Development Agenda, Agenda 2030. Our focus also today is very much on a major Korean contribution, the Saemaul Undong New Village Movement Initiative for people-led local development. We congratulate, Madam President, your country on its own commitment to achieving sustainable development. Your country had participated so strongly in the formulation of the post-2015 agenda, and you continually support other countries in their development journeys, including through the Republic of Korea UNDP MDG Trust Fund. We thank the Republic of Korea for sharing its development experiences and knowledge gained through the Saemaul Undong, noting with appreciation your support to UNDP for updating and adapting the model for other developing countries, and for your promotion of South-South and triangular cooperation too in the way this model is disseminated. Scaling up the Saemaul Undong model will support localization of the new SDGs and enhance the measurement of their implementation and their impact. This initiative has its success resting in the mobilisation of communities for local development and in the consistency of local approaches with national development plans. So, we are going to come to our very distinguished panellists in a moment, but I understand that first we will see a very short video on the Saemaul Initiative for Inclusive and Sustainable New Communities to put all the contributions into their context. If technology works, we will roll it now.
To me, Saemaul Undong project is a project that we should really adopt. It has all that is impressive to sensitize somebody to be a better person in a better place.
Korea made such a miraculous social and economic development just within 50 years. And in the heart of such an economic development, there has been a Saemaul Undong. I think that the Saemaul Undong is a combination of leadership and self-participation from the local people.
Most of the teachers we are having are not natives in the area. They come from very far. If we can still mobilize the community and we put up a staff house, maybe teachers who come from far can stay around. I would like this school to look better than it is through working hand in hand with the stakeholders.
I think education is very important, so I want to invest on the education in my child. There is a project from Korea called the Saemaul Undong. This project is going to help communities to mobilize us.
The Saemaul Undong initiative comes to help reawaken the spirit that was always there of self-help, of community cooperation. The localization of the Sustainable Development Goals begins with the design of programs.
The UNDP has a great capability in the field of developing sector and has a long history and has a great knowledge about the developing countries. And as a new emerging donor, Korea wants to share those kind of knowledge.
Mi sueño es tener una panadería comunal, que estén trabajando mis señoras y cada día y vender y repartir a las tiendas, al colegio, para los chicos, masitas, no pan nomás, galletas también y postres también, lo que es en las repostería. Eso es lo que quiero ver. Viendo eso voy a estar recién feliz. Pero sí quiero ver eso.
Lo que hace el programa Saemaul Undong Sostenible es que trabaja con las personas, con lo que ellas quieren y con el futuro que ellas quieren lograr para ellas, para ellos mismos y para sus hijos.
Yo creo en la cooperación sur-sur por el hecho de que nos plantea cómo gente igual que nosotros ha resuelto problemas similares a nuestros problemas.
บ้านนี่มีน้ำท่วมมันเกิดเป็นปีมาแล้วก็มีน้ำท่วมกันไปมาก็ยากเห็นหน้าได้แต่ฤดูเดียวฤดูสองนี่ก็น้ำท่วมเฮ็ดก็บ่ได้หลายคือเดี๋ยวนี้แหละมีแต่เลี้ยงเป็ดเลี้ยงไก่แล้วแต่ละครอบครัวก็ดีแล้วก็อยากขอของเมืองนั่นเฮ็ดนาเฉพาะนาแซงในบ้านนี่ให้มันสะดวกสบายแล้วว่ามันบ่ทั่วถึงนะเพราะเท่านั้นแหละการขอก็ได้จะได้ถนนหนทางกับคลองน้ำ
Cái mục tiêu của chúng tôi là muốn là khai thác cái nội lực của người dân cho xây dựng thôn mới, tạo cho họ một cái sự tự tin và họ tự đứng lên để làm chủ cuộc sống của mình.
Candid spirit is closely related to the sustainability of the developing countries. So the candid spirit can be the final objective of this project.
That short video gave us some very important insights into this experience which Korea is sharing with a number of countries. And it therefore gives me great pleasure to invite Her Excellency, the President of the Republic of Korea, to address us and present Saemaul Undong and its considerable contribution to Korea's rapid development and Korea's desire to share it. Thank you, Madam President.
Your Excellencies, President Kagame of Rwanda, President Chumali of Laos, President Sang of Vietnam, President Humala of Peru, Secretary General Ban, Secretary General Korea, Madam Clark, Mr. Mohildin, ladies and gentlemen, let me say how gratifying it is to see this event take place. For in our pursuit of a 21st century paradigm for rural development, we are drawing inspiration from Korea's Saemaul Undong. My thanks go to the OECD and UNDP. In partnership with the Korean government, they've been endeavoring to make the Saemaul Undong more applicable around the world. May this day set a milestone in scaling up our rural development model into a shared resource for all. Fellow leaders, ladies and gentlemen, the Saemaul Undong is a development strategy that has not only helped to lift Korea up, but also transformed our national ethos. Half a century ago, Korea's per capita GDP stood below $100. We were among the poorest countries in the world. And yet, fired by a desire for a better life, the whole nation rallied together to climb out of poverty. And we did so in the spirit of diligence, self-help, and cooperation that animated the Saemaul Undong. As a result, Korea managed to both industrialize and democratize within 5 decades. We rose to become one of the top 15 economies in the world. We became the first former aid recipient to join the ranks of official donors. I watched my late father, who was president at the time, push the Saemaul Undong forward. As I did so, I was able to learn firsthand the recipes for success and the multipliers that helped change the people and transform the nation. The first ingredient of success was the incentive scheme and competition. In the first year of the Saemaul Undong, the government gave out equal amounts of cement to some 33,000 villages across the country. They were told, you are free to use the cement as you see fit, as long as they are used for collective projects. Some villages would apply their labor, their capital, their land, and use the cement for public projects that served local needs. Others would have little to show for it. The following year, new supplies were dispensed, but only to the 1,700 or so villages that had put the cement to good use. Farmers whose energy had been sapped by long-standing poverty began to compete and rally together to win more supplies. This would eventually unleash a tidal wave of modernization across rural Korea. The second formula is trust-based leadership at the national level. The nation's leader uprooted corruption from the bureaucracy. People then began to place their trust in the state. With integrity and drive, he kept political populism at bay. He devoted himself to making sure both rural and urban areas prospered in harmony. The vision and determination of the leader struck a deep chord with the people, enabling the Saemaul Undong to achieve maximum synergy. The third is the voluntary and proactive engagement of the people. Having seen how the can-do spirit can lead to new realities, the people themselves stepped up to become the agents of change. The government put in place systematic programs to nurture Saemaul Undong champions. These people went on to spearhead change, inducing willing participation from their communities. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Korea has been working hard to share proven approaches and know-how with developing countries. We have been promoting the Saemaul Undong as a practical model for rural development, one that might help developing partners avoid the poverty trap. And these efforts did bring results. But we are, in my view, at a point where the model needs to be better tailored to the differing contexts of other countries. Indeed, elements of the Saemaul Undong should be modified into principles and actions that are broadly applicable. The Saemaul Undong's features and modalities also need to be updated. Doing so would enable the program to better support developing countries as they deal with complex rural challenges and pursue the shared goal of ending poverty and achieving sustainable development. This is why I welcome the initiative of the OECD and the UNDP to draw on the Saemaul experience in crafting a new rural development paradigm and an inclusive and sustainable new communities model. Even to this day, the Saemaul Undong in Korea is still a work in progress. In fact, it continues to make strides as a communal movement that values sharing, serving, and caring, and aim to tackle the challenge of rapid urbanization. As both a creative and cultural campaign to strengthen local grassroots capacity, and as a global movement that furthers the cause of happiness in our planet. By adapting to the distinct needs of countries and to the changing times, the Saemaul Undong can become a strategy for rural development globally and for progress nationally. I very much hope to see a development paradigm inspired by the Saemaul Undong help end poverty in our world and make development sustainable. To this end, the Republic of Korea stands ready to work with developing countries and international bodies like the UN, the OECD, and the World Bank. May wide-ranging discussions on pathways for concrete action emerge from today's gathering. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President, for telling us how Saemaul Undong helped Korea on the road to its remarkable development achievements and of your country's desire to share these experiences. Can I now invite the United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, to present the importance of the new SDGs agenda for global stability and I guess its relevance to this very important Korean initiative.
Thank you very much, UNDP Administrator Helen Clark, Your Excellency President Park Geun-hye of the Republic of Korea, Your Excellencies President Humala of Peru, President Kagame of Rwanda, President Trong Tan Sang of Vietnam, President Chumali Sayasone of Laos, Mr. Angel Gurria, Secretary General of OECD, Mr. Mahmoud Mohildin, World Bank President, Special Envoy, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you, first of all, UNDP Administrator Helen Clark and OECD Secretary General Angel Gurria, and in particular, Madam President Park Geun-hye of Korea, for bringing us all together. I'm here to welcome all of you. At the same time, as one of the Korean citizens, I'm very much deeply moved that for the first time in the United Nations, this Saemaul Undong is now being introduced to the member states. While Saemaul Undong has been in many parts of developing world have been practiced and introduced. And just one day after the adoption of visionary sustainable development goals is quite meaningful, that as a way of helping, accelerating this implementation and adapting these good experiences to many developing world, Saemaul Undong is now being introduced formally by UNDP, OECD, and President of Republic of Korea herself. Today is very significant. This is a day one after world leaders adopted by consensus sustainable development yesterday. We have promised to leave no one behind, including families in rural areas. There will be no progress on global development without local development. I myself grew up in a very small, dusty village, and I have seen myself as government official at that time when the former President Park Chung-hee launched this Saemaul Undong. I was a part of this, and I was one of the government officials who really practiced and helped this Saemaul Undong. I saw how Saemaul Undong movement changed my village and my country. I feel proud to have witnessed myself how the once poor village and the mindset of the people, villagers, changed dramatically. The Korean countryside went from poverty to prosperity. Saemaul Undong, the new village movement in English. By the way, thank you, Administrator Helen Clark, for your very correct pronunciation in Korean, Saemaul Undong. This Saemaul Undong is remarkable for its focus on people. As I've been repeatedly saying that Sustainable Development Goals is people-centered and planet-friendly. Therefore, this introducing and practicing this Saemaul Undong in many developing world is very appropriate. It was based on three key principles. First, diligence. Second, self-help. Third, mutual cooperation. By empowering people, Saemaul Undong uplifted communities. And these communities went on to transform the nation. Education was the key ingredient in our recipe for success. the Republic of Korea is the only nation in the world that moved from the list of least developed countries to the member of OECD, now a member of DAC, now from recipient countries to donor countries. It achieved this in just one generation. It was remarkable to see the villages and people making changes day after day. The government leaders motivated people by practicing lead by example. They were the first to lead the people. People who were skeptical at the beginning participated, voluntarily becoming part of a huge tide of societal change. Education played a key role. It spread like a wildfire. As a Secretary General, I have been witnessing many changes taking place in Africa and elsewhere. I'll tell you my personal story. While I am sitting with the President Kagame, many years ago, I visited, in my capacity as a foreign minister at that time, Rwanda, and I was received by President Kagame. Before I visited him, I thought this Rwanda is a quite different country. I have visited many African countries, completely different scenes which I have seen. Streets from the airport to the town was very clean, neat. People were sweeping their yards. Then I talked to President Kagame. Well, Mr. President, I'm deeply impressed. How can you make your country so clean, so neat, so beautiful, not to mention? And he said that, showing me a book. Well, look, Minister, I am doing exactly what Korean people are doing. Then he was showing me a Saemaul Undong book, a book written in English. And I was very much impressed. And thank you very much, Mr. President, for spreading all this movement and campaign and spirit of self-help and mutual cooperation. This is a good example. I have seen in Uganda and in many countries, they are coming to me, Mr. Secretary General, can you just help? Can you tell Korean President to introduce a Saemaul Undong to my country? So I'm very happy that we are having this occasion. I'm such a strong believer in the value of education. I advocated education for development at every opportunity, including at the World Education Forum in Incheon, Korea last May, and the Summit on Education for Development in Oslo in Norway in July. I'm not the only one. People everywhere understand how education drives progress. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in June 2013, I was invited to speak at a school in Harlem, in New York, called Democracy Prep. Some of you might have read all this story. I like to go out into the community, so I accepted this invitation, even though I have never heard of the school before. When I got there, I learned it has an incredibly high success rate. All the graduates, seniors, they went to very good college, very prestigious colleges. And I was surprised to find out that the school's founder, principal, was inspired by the Saemaul Undong movement in Korea. So they were practicing in the center of Manhattan. This reminded me that education for empowerment works everywhere. Finally, I would like to really thank President Park Geun-hye for her initiative and visionary leadership to share Korea's experience with many developing countries. We have a new universal agenda for ending poverty, and we know how to achieve it. Together, let us build a better future for all. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. And you speaking from your personal experience of what you saw and what you witnessed in the transformation of your country is very inspiring. We understand you have wall-to-wall appointments, so if you need to quietly slip away, this is fully understood. Thank you very much for being with us. Much appreciated. Both the President of Korea and the Secretary General were kind enough to refer to the work of UNDP and of OECD, building from the principles of Saemaul Undong in our work on inclusive and sustainable new communities. And for UNDP, we are implementing a program around this, inspired by Korea, in 6 countries across 3 regions. But OECD has done a lot of work on a new rural development paradigm. I'm going to invite the Secretary-General to address us on that now. Let me say I'm very conscious that it is 5:30, and sometimes interpreters do say 6 o'clock is drop-dead time. So if I could just ask all our very high-level speakers to bear that in mind as we go through the remaining high-level contributions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen. Madam President, Mahmoud, Mr. President, as the international community launches the Sustainable Development Goals today, we know one thing for sure: rural development is key to their success. Achieving food security, sustainable agricultural, rural development, they're all part of the 2015 agenda. In addition to being objectives in their own right, they are central to achieving the first SDG, which is eradicating poverty by 2030. Globally, 3.3 billion people live in rural areas today, and that number is expected to continue to grow until 2028. So tackling human development means tackling rural development. The two go hand in hand. We used to think the solution was rapid urbanization, rapid industrialization. Now we know that in well-performing economies, rural areas tend to be resilient, contributing to national wealth and social stability. In these countries, characterized by solid institutions, local capacity, and diversified rural economies, rural policy embraces multiple economic sectors, and it embraces different levels of government. We call this approach the new rural paradigm. What's more, we think this approach can be applied and tailored in a range of contexts to help meet the challenges of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It reflects the experiences of a large group of both developed and developing countries. And perhaps most importantly, it recognizes the need to adapt previous experiences not only to the specific context of developing countries today, but also to the new challenges and opportunities of the 21st century. Our work on this new rural paradigm has been inspired by the experiences of Korea in its Saemaul Undong program, as well as the experiences of several developing countries with which we have been working. Your Excellency, President Park, your country is living proof of, as it has mentioned now repeatedly, you can go from rural development to one of the most advanced countries in the world, but still keep the power of collective action, combining top-down and bottom-up approaches, monitoring, evaluation, and, of course, highlighting the importance of education, of rural infrastructure, and agricultural extension, all to achieve rural development. The Korean story, and in particular the story of Saemaul Undong, is an impressive one. Just a brief reminder, between 1970 and 1979, the real incomes of farming households increased by an average of 7% per year. Now, through Saemaul Undong, Koreans have demonstrated the power of collective action, of doing more by doing it together to achieve transformative development outcomes. More than 30 countries have since adopted elements of Saemaul Undong, embracing community-driven development. Today's discussion on our research, led by the OECD's Development Center, I salute Mario Pezzini, the President, should encourage the frank exchange of experiences between countries at all levels of development. The proposed paradigm is diagnostic, is not prescriptive. It offers the building blocks, not the blueprint, for effective rural development strategies and policies. It allows for the adaptation to the case of each particular country and each circumstance. Today's conversation is just the start of this dialogue, and a dialogue that we want to continue with all developing countries. This is, today you just talked about partnerships a moment ago in another one of the panels. This is one of the most important, most meaningful partnerships with one of the most important, most meaningful potentials. By learning from one another, this partnership with Korea, with the UNDP, with the World Bank, with all the countries in the table, and by lifting together, as the Korean proverb says, which will make things lighter, we can design better rural development policies for better lives. Madam, thank you very much, and thank you for the privilege of joining you in this effort.
Thank you very much to OECD Secretary General. And OECD is a great partner for UNDP to work with. It has tremendous research capacity and the ability to design and inform initiatives. And where we link up is our global presence, and OECD's thought leadership can really help take great initiatives like this Korean one and make it relevant to many, many places. So we're now going to come to our other four presidents. We're so lucky to have 5 presidents on a panel, and they will discuss their vision around local development, their own country's practices, success stories and lessons learned, as well as their interest in the Korean experience, all in 4 minutes each. Thank you so much to the President of the Republic of Rwanda, His Excellency Paul Kagame, has the floor first. Thank you.
Excellency Park, the President of the Republic of Korea, Excellencies, Heads of State, UNDP Administrator, OECD Secretary General, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I thank the government of Korea, UNDP, and OECD for the invitation to this event. Excellency Park, President Park, as you know, Rwanda and Korea share some common experiences which have served to strengthen collaboration between our two countries. Korea's success with the Saemaul Undong is a lesson of inspiration to Rwanda and to many other countries, and that local ownership of development programs, citizen involvement, and national unity always yields results. Indeed, these are the values that guided Rwanda's post-genocide development agenda. We chose to take responsibility for our reconstruction by building consensus on a national vision and working together to ensure no one was left behind. For Rwandans, 80% of whom live in rural communities, homegrown solutions and initiatives drawn from our culture have been the driving force for progress. From Gacaca, our community courts, which has brought restorative justice and reconciliation to once divided nation, to Ubudehe, which supports rural communities to collectively solve problems related to poverty, to Imihigo, which enables citizens to keep their leaders accountable, Umuganda, and many others. Changing mindsets and doing things differently is never easy, but doing the right things and getting results builds resilience and the capacity to do even more. Each country has its own unique circumstances and challenges, but also the resources to solve its problems, complemented by external partnerships. This paves the way for countries to learn from each other within this spirit of global collaboration, which is needed to achieve the new global goals of sustainable development. I thank you, Madam Chair, and looking forward to learning other lessons from other speakers.
Thank you, President Kagame, and thank you for being such a wonderful champion of the MDGs for so many years, supporting the Secretary-General and his advocacy. Can I now ask His Excellency, the President of the Lao People's Democratic Republic, to take the floor. Your Excellency.
Madam Moderator, Excellencies, it is my great honor to participate in this special high-level event. Taking this opportunity, I would like to commend the Republic of Korea, UNDP and OECD for co-hosting this event on the very important topic which is relevant to our current development, especially in aligning the post-2015 development agenda adopted at the UN summit yesterday into the development priorities while meeting the capacity needs of each country. Over the past years, the Lao government has attached great importance to rural development and poverty reduction as one of the key priorities identified in the 5-year National Socio-Economic Development Plans. To achieve the goal of reducing poverty, our government has established a National Committee for Rural Development and Poverty Eradication in 2007, mandated to coordinate and follow up on the implementation of policy on rural development and poverty eradication across the country, in which we focus on key areas such as permanent settlement and creation of permanent jobs for the people in the rural area, conducting vocational and labor skills training for the poor, establishing a financing mechanism at the local level to provide access to financial resources, promoting commercial production, developing socio-economic infrastructure, and adopting incentive policy to attract domestic and foreign investors to the rural areas. In addition, since 2012, we have been implementing a 3-level development initiative known as Samsang, that is making a province a strategic body, a district as a comprehensively strong body, and a village as development body. To this end, the government has mobilized resources for developing infrastructure, promoting commercial productions by providing credits for commodity production in 51 pilot projects and 109 pilot villages, with a total number of 943 pilot projects. Through the implementation of these pilot projects, important achievements have been recorded, such as capacity of district and village authorities has been strengthened. With an increasing sense of ownership, local community has become more enthusiastic and proactive in contributing to poverty reduction projects, which directly rendered them tangible benefits. Therefore, we consider that the three-level development initiative has considerably contributed towards a more sustainable and inclusive rural development, thus steadily improving the livelihood of the people. Madam Moderator, Excellencies, we highly value Saemaul Undong initiative and commend the Republic of Korea for its remarkable achievements since 1970s. This has become a good model for the rural development and poverty eradication being applied in many developing countries, including in the Lao PDR. We are of the view that the Saemaul Undong projects are proved to be very effective, sustainable, and relevant for the rural development and poverty eradication in the Lao PDR. It also corresponds to our three-level development initiative. Since 2008, some Saemaul Undong pilot projects have been implemented. In the Lao PDR through the assistance given by UNSCAP. As a result, local community in some districts in Vientiane capital and Vientiane province has taken more ownership in collaborating with Village Development Committee. It was also observed that cooperation and coordination among various sectors at the local level has been improved. In late 2013, I had a great privilege to pay a state visit to the Republic of Korea. During the meeting with President Park Geun-hye, I also endorsed the integrated rural development project with Saemaul Undong's participatory approach to be implemented in Vientiane capital and Vientiane and Savannakhel province in the Lao PDR for the period of 2015 to 2019 with support by KOICA. Madam Moderator, the Lao PDR is pleased to have been selected as one of the pilot countries to implement the UNDP Global Initiative for Saemaul Undong Initiative towards inclusive and sustainable new communities, or ISNC, starting from July 2015 to the end of 2016. The main objectives of the ISNC project are to help rural villages in improving nutrition status and providing greater access to food security, and to assist local communities in strengthening their capacity in development planning, and to promote exchange of knowledge and lessons learned. In conclusion, on behalf of the government and people of the Lao PDR, I would like to express my sincere thanks to the government and people, to the Republic of Korea, UNDP, and international organizations for the continued support and cooperation that has been extended to us in our national development cause, especially in rural development and poverty eradication in the Lao PDR throughout the past years. And we do hope that such support and assistance will continue in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and we thank the Lao People's Democratic Republic for agreeing to pilot UNDP's Inclusive and Sustainable New Communities Initiative, inspired by Saemaul Undong. It's now my pleasure to give the floor to His Excellency, the President of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. Your Excellency.
Okay, thank you. Kính thưa bà lãnh đạo
Excellency,
thưa ngài lãnh đạo
UNDP
thưa bà Tổng thống Hàn Quốc
Secretary, Administrator, Excellency Park Geun-hye, President of the Republic of Korea, Excellencies, leaders of organizations and countries. It gives me great pleasure to attend this special event on a new rural development paradigm and the inclusive sustainable community inspired by Saemaul Undong and co-organized by the Republic of Korea, UNDP and OECD. I believe that our event today provides a substantial forum for us to share experiences in realizing policies and models on rural development in our countries. Ladies and gentlemen, the Agenda 2030 on Sustainable Development puts forward a new strategic vision which reflects our aspiration of a world without poverty. However, in many developing countries, 3/4 of the poor people are living in rural areas and making their living from agriculture. Rich and poor gap between rural and urban areas is widening. Therefore, Vietnam and many other countries have strongly supported the mainstreaming of agricultural and rural development in the Agenda 2030, particularly the Sustainable Development Goal 2.8, increasing investment in rural infrastructure, agricultural research and extension services, technology development, and plant and livestock gene banks in order to enhance agricultural productive capacity in developing countries, with a view to promoting sustainable agriculture, narrowing the rich-poor gap between rural and urban areas, contributing to the overall progress of the society. Rural development is an important cause and at the same time a major challenge to almost all developing countries, since their resources and budget are tight. As a result, developing countries should work out an appropriate development strategy which best suits their conditions. Each country has their own experiences in agricultural and rural development. The successes of Saemaul Undong movement, deeply rooted in simple but very efficient ideas, have turned the poor and backward rural areas in the Republic of Korea into those of prosperity and modernity. The key element making the movement a great success is to bring into full use the roles of the people. All criteria to select projects derived from the interest of the people. This is an invaluable lesson that Vietnam and other developing countries could learn. The idea behind the movement coincides with consistent policy of Vietnam, placing the people at the heart of all development strategies. Therefore, we have learned from the movement during our efforts to build new rural areas and attained positive outcomes. Ladies and gentlemen, as an agricultural country with 70% of our population living in the rural area, rural development and sustainable rural community have an important role in the overall development of our country. Since 2010, Vietnam implemented the national program on new rural development with 19 criteria to promote rural development, improve living standards, and increase income of the farmers. Great strides have been made in the development of Vietnam's rural areas. 700,000 kilometers of rural roads have been renovated and newly built, over 20,000 classrooms and thousands of cultural houses, clinics, clean water supply stations, irrigation system built in rural areas. More than 18,000 production models applying advanced technology have been implemented. The coordination between businesses and scientists have borne fruits. As a result, rural areas in Vietnam have changed significantly, especially in terms of infrastructure and income. I would like to share some of our experiences as follows. First, the comprehensive, inclusive, and long-term socio-economic development in rural areas requires strong political commitment and engagement of the entire political system and the active participation of the whole society. We need to raise the awareness of the community and give priorities to the recruitment and training of key officials at all levels. The village and communal officials should be provided with basic knowledge on new rural development so that they can move forward in the process with minimum resources. Second, no one understands the rural area better than those living there. Therefore, rural development should be mastered by the people. The government must give them autonomy. Based on their actual demands, the people will decide on what to do first and how they will do it. The government should then allocate resources to these primary demands. Third, sustainable rural development requires large-scale investment. Financial assistance from the government is necessary, but not enough. We need to socialize and diversify resources and make the use of resources transparent, following the motto, known by the people, done by the people, discussed by the people, inspected by the people, and benefited by the people. Therefore, the government should put forward policies that encourage and facilitate the engagement of businesses and political organizations in the process of new rural building. It is also equally important to bring into full play the internal resources of the communities. Resources mobilized from the communities can come in different forms, such as labor, financial contributions to public projects, improving housing conditions, and using credits for business production. It is not easy to identify an effective method and models for rural development. The new rural program in Vietnam is a result of our continuous study of the lessons from other countries and our own past successes and failures. We are willing to share our experiences so that we can achieve sustainable development and successfully implement the 2030 development agenda while ensuring that no one is left behind in that process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And we now come to our last presentation of our President, which is His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Peru. You have the floor, sir.
Muchas gracias. Dignísimas personalidades que se encuentran acompañándonos en el panel y al distinguido público. Hablar sobre el desarrollo rural y el modelo de nuevas comunidades sostenibles, inclusivas, es un tema de relevancia y sobre todo en el marco de lo que hoy día estamos realizando en Naciones Unidas, que es la consecución o el establecimiento de los nuevos Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible 2030, y en el cual hay dos objetivos muy potentes y ambiciosos que son hambre cero y eliminación de la pobreza.
We want zero hunger and the elimination of poverty. Attaining these objectives has much to do with rural development. For this reason, I'd like to make a few comments. One of the main deficits, problems in developing countries is precisely rural development. There, it's the center of poverty and insecurity. And the development of agriculture as an economic activity, as an age-old activity, is something where the state must play a role. And this involves much experience, which has been discussed. In Peru also we have experience in this area. Basically there's agricultural cooperation, as we call it, the Minca, the Aine, and there we have indigenous communities which work together to work in the field, to work together in building infrastructure for the community. However, that's not enough. It hasn't been enough. Today, we see that for development, the rural development in the rural areas, the state must be present. There must be services which are provided, and this must be health policies, educational policies, sanitation policies, highways. This would make it possible to create internal markets. This makes it possible for us to give sustainability to rural development. Today in the world, or rather, Never before has the world seen such a production of food, but there are high rates of hunger throughout the world. It's not just a problem of distribution, there are political problems involved. Hunger in the world is a political problem. And furthermore, there are some studies that say that about 40% of the food that is actually produced is wasted. How much food is waste? How much do we waste in our countries? Today, we have agriculture which is fighting for food security and dealing with major industries that produce food and kind of high-produced food. There's a kind of hunger abroad which makes us possible to look to 2030 and set as our goal the eradication of hunger. I'm saying this just as food for thought. We believe that the problem of development, rural development, must have tools, must go for solutions that will help us succeed. There must be clean technologies and sustainable technologies. There must be markets. And when we say markets, we know we belong to a country, we are part of a country that produces food. We have potatoes throughout the world, and we promote quinoa, for example, for the world, exported to the world. And when we talk about markets, we mean markets that can be accessible to outsiders. Some of the main barriers are not national barriers, but they are barriers beyond us, having to do with bureaucracies, foreigners, outsiders. And these are the types of problems that the rural areas have to deal with. We too believe that it's worth giving some thought to a national experience. Peru, 15 years ago, about 50% of the population lived in a state of poverty. Today, we've reduced the percentage to less than 25%, and extreme poverty to less than 5%. But the most important thing is, in reducing poverty, is including the society and the economy. And we've done most of our work in the rural areas. It's much harder in the rural areas to succeed than it is to urban areas. You have to bring the state in, so to speak. You have to provide opportunities to these areas, to the field, to the peasants. And that's the key to modernizing rural areas and modernizing their economies. In our experience, the experience has been very helpful to us. We've learned that there must be irrigation projects, not major scale, no, just irrigation for small communities that are devoted to agriculture. And normally, they are supported by rainfall, and that's a seasonal problem. So with irrigation, we can provide water on an ongoing basis, and there might be 2 harvests per annum, or even 3 for a certain product. And furthermore, when some countries like Peru are already suffering from climate change, that's a problem. The perverse problems of climate change. And very often, droughts suddenly become periods of rain, great rainfall, and vice versa. And agriculture has to adjust to these sudden changes and adapt. And I would also say that we're also getting ready for the new ongoing arrival of El Niño. And this has to do with global warming. And that's why, in this period, we have to deal with objectives, sustainable development, 2030 sustainable development goals. We have to think about our experiences in the rural areas and the experiences that we in countries like Peru have already had. Global warming. That's part of Peru's contribution, so to speak, to our struggle against global warming. And other countries are in similar situations. They will be making their national commitments to mitigate and adapt to these problems. And in conclusion, there is one subject which I do believe is a subject of consensus, and that is education. We want quality education in the field. We want quality education in rural areas, and we will transform in this way not only agriculture, but we will create opportunities, possibilities for the coming generation. Today, these people are living far from the services that the state can give them. In certain the internet is a possibility. Services in general are other possibilities. And very often, the rural area people in the rural areas don't have access to this. So these are experiences which we would like to make available to all of you for food for thought. To the extent that we can resolve problems of inequality and the problem of poverty in rural areas, then we will become developing countries. We will go from developing to developed countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and indeed thanks to all the heads of state for sharing their experiences and perspectives on the importance of rural development. We will now have a short contribution from the World Bank's President's Special Envoy for post-2015. Mahmoud Mohildin, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for this opportunity given to the World Bank. And very honored to be with this very distinguished panel. Madam President Park of Korea, thank you for introducing us warmly to this approach of comprehensive development that worked. It is not experimental, it has been transformational with very good lessons for everybody to learn from. And many thanks for the heads of states for sharing their ideas, and of course for Madam Clark and Secretary General Gurria for their insightful introductory comments. Two facts. We have 800 million people still go to bed hungry every night. Despite the progress in the MDGs, this is one of the facts that we are facing. The second fact, that as far as poverty is concerned, 78% of the poor live in rural areas, of which 80% work in agriculture. So the presentation today, which had a focus on experience and measures that worked, is of great relevance, not just to get the lessons of the past, but to engage in effective implementation of the SDGs going forward. Thank you, Madam Park, for reminding us of the importance of incentives, trust, and empowering of people. And here we see that as a common ingredient for success in our sharing of knowledge, not just on our South-South cooperation mechanism that we have in the bank, but in all elements of work that we are trying to engage in. We learned from Rwanda the value of learning from others and the issue of accountability. We learned from Lao PDR the importance of training and access to finance and the importance of localizing investment and attracting foreign direct investment to rural areas. I have a little Korean experience. When I was a Minister of Investment, everybody, when we talk here about better life for all, there is the other logo that is known, that life is good, known by LG. And then every Egyptian farmer's dream was to go to the Gulf states, spend a couple of years and bring some of these good Korean goods. But really, life was much better when some of the leading Korean firms established themselves in rural areas. And then when you ask an Egyptian farmer, life is not just good, life is wonderful, because it is providing opportunities. It is providing wages, earnings, not just consumers of good products that last for life, some of them, but the opportunity of engaging in discipline, in investment. And Lao PDR reminded us of this important engagement with investment and the kind of transformation that happens, because even when you invest in the increase of productivity in farming, the challenge with the education and those whom we are training for the future is basically what to do in the non-farm sectors. Those people are graduating from schools and technical education and even with university degrees. They are not all going to be working just in the farming side. We learned from Vietnam the importance of science and technology. And this had been in the past an issue to be focused alone on urban areas. Rural areas and farming benefit more from that perspective. And of course, the good Peruvian examples on that were not really working about simple elements that are very much a complex political process that requires governance, requires solution, and being reminded as well of the challenges of climate change. In the bank, we are very happy to be very much in the middle of that. Many projects that we are doing are in partnership with Korea today and many of the countries, and of course with UNDP and the advice from the OECD, especially in the MENA countries. Today as well, we are trying to work on legal systems to empower not just the men but women to provide property rights, because here we are talking about rural areas, we're talking about land, the most valuable assets, and it is very much a challenge that in many countries, like in sub-Saharan Africa, we see only 10% of documents to establish their property rights. And we are being reminded about the importance of financial access to banks. You cannot really get access to banks and finance from them without proper documentation to prove that. From the bank as well, we have 180 active operations across the world that are investing 16 billion in these approaches, learning from the Korean example and from others. Many of us are wondering, I'm coming from a village myself. At the age of 5, we have water. At the age of 10, I was born in 1965. At the age of 10, we had electricity. And then we had paved roads everywhere. But there was something always missing, this comprehensive approach to development that is very much requiring this kind of learning. And this comprehensive approach will not just come from the good central planners we have. It is basically from this inclusive approach that we learned from the leaders we have today. About, yes, having the poor, yeah, it's a fact, but the poor know best when it comes to solution. They can give us the priorities and the solutions for the future. I'm very, very proud that I'm here with a country that we always use, not just in your presence, Madam President, but in the absence. If you are desperate, if your country is poor, our President, Jim Kim, reminds us that his country was not even, when he was born in 1959, was not even eligible for concession and loans for either. You are not even allowed to get some funding because the bad credit conditions in Korea back in the 60s didn't allow the country to have access even to concessional finance. Now, Korea is proud and is providing credit and giving back, and more important than the money, Madam President and the leaders, is giving us example of hope. If there are desperate conditions today from many of the failed states, from the fragile and post-conflict states, we have a living example of success that worked and is willing to extend the knowledge through the networks and the cooperation, and we are very happy and proud to be part of this. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much to our colleague from the World Bank for drawing out these lessons from the experiences the presidents have shared with us today, and for your commitment to this work and these partnerships. I understand that there will be distributed for everyone what we're calling implementation guidance, which UNDP has developed together with national partners in this initiative and with the Republic of Korea. It looks at the lessons that have been learned from Saemaul Undong, assesses how to apply them and where to apply them, where to map out demand and identify what might be the most relevant places. So we're very committed to sharing the evidence of what we do in development, and the evidence is always drawn from the lessons and experiences of the countries with which we work. So we now come to some very brief closing remarks, and can I thank the permanent missions of Peru, Korea, Vietnam and Laos for supplying interpreters to enable us to understand each other in this final stage. Madam President, you have listened to the impact that the ideas that have come from Korea about rural development have had. Would you like to share some concluding comments with us?
Fellow leaders, distinguished speakers, I listened to your precious insights very carefully. I firmly believe that the actual lessons from each country's unique context will be invaluable as we develop the Saemaul Undong into a 21st century paradigm for rural development. Today, half the world's population live in rural areas. More than 90% of them are in developing countries. 60% of the rural population in developing countries are suffering from extreme poverty. Without rural development, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is unlikely to succeed. The Saemaul Undong is a strategy to unleash a nation's full potential. It is also a blueprint for national harmony, for building a society where no one is excluded by promoting balanced development between urban and rural areas. I earnestly hope that the Saemaul Undong will pave the way for a second and a third miracle around the world. As I mentioned earlier, it's when government-led efforts are combined with voluntary grassroots participation that the Saemaul Undong can come to fruition. It's when each country brings together the yearning and the determination of its people to make miracle happen that the UN's aspiration in the 2030 Agenda can be on track to a more meaningful and fuller implementation. May the Saemaul Undong take root in the near future as a 21st century paradigm for rural development, one with more universal appeal. And may the precious seeds we sow today bring a rich harvest tomorrow. Throughout this promising journey, the Republic of Korea will be there to exchange our experience and know-how. We will be there as a friend to help promote the happiness of all. Again, my sincere thanks to everyone for being here today.
So we just heard the concluding remarks there from President Park Geun-hye. As is pretty usual with these kind of events, it did go slightly over time as the officials did have a lot to say. I'll just give you a brief overview of what the President had to say in her opening remarks about an hour and a half ago. She talked about how proud she was that the Saemaul Undong was being adapted and applied around the world to make the world more prosperous. She also talked about the history and the success of the movement here in Korea. And she did mention, though, how the Saemaul Undong does require the voluntary participation of the people for it to work properly and fully, and she recognises that Saemaul Undong needs to be tailored to specific countries. That was something a couple of the world leaders brought up as well. Ban Ki-moon as well spoke, the UN Secretary-General, of course, a Korean himself. He said how he saw how the Saemaul movement transformed his village and also the mindset of the people in Korea, and lauded the success and glowing words of support as well from world leaders from countries like Peru, Vietnam, Laos and Rwanda. We will have more updates on this session and the rest of the day's events from New York in our newscast coming up later up in the day. For all our viewers watching in Korea, have a wonderful Chuseok. It is Chuseok today, and we thank you very much for joining us today. Goodbye.